Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 251st of Kouryer podcast. Our today's guest is Mr. Jonjo Hemmens. He's a senior environment artist at That's No Moon Studio from Liverpool, United Kingdom. And of course, before getting to the captions of the episode, let me quickly mention that in the for contact section of the captions, you can find the ID to his Instagram account, the links to his art station and Twitter, and also a link to a certain YouTube video, which is also in his YouTube channel as well, which is titled UE5 Tequila Sunset, which, well, if you know anything of his recent viral posts or what the Tequila Sunset, is referencing to, well, I think you're gonna like this episode. Well, with that kind of, introduction out of the way, I need to also mention that, yes, I think I mentioned in my previous episode as well, my schedule is unintentionally turning into a monthly upload right now. But yeah, it's kind of much more, the frequency of my uploads are much lower because of of course my IRL stuff, things that are happening in my real life. And I think I explained them in previous episodes, but basically I might, move houses or even countries, I don't know, immigrate to another place, but that's to be seen based on their response to my visa. All right. So basically I'm going to be really busy. So thank you. I genuinely, want to thank anyone who has been sticking till now and has been putting up with all this stuff, delays. And just to give another good news, I have 2 more episodes lined up for tomorrow. I have with this one included, I have 3 new episodes going to be uploaded soon. So 251, 252, and 253. So with those updates out of the way, let's jump into this episode. Well, first things first, thank you so much for taking out your time to join us on this episode. I really appreciate that. I mean, I'm sure you must be swamped with messages after your recent post that, this elysium post that got uploaded everywhere, got viral everywhere,
Yeah, no problem. It's always nice to take the time to talk to anyone about art, really, whoever's interested.
Yeah, and there's actually so many things that I really want to ask you and discuss about, especially, since I'm also I'm not I wouldn't even consider myself a junior environment artist, but I'm in the process of becoming a junior environment. Does that make sense? So there's even so many things that are kind of fresh for me as well when it comes to the pipeline. So I really have some interesting, questions for you as well regarding the pipeline of your workflow as well. And but first, let's start with the signature question of the podcast, which is give us a little introduction on how we got into the world of visual arts and design. Basically, tell us your origin story of, how you basically, what path led you to decide to become an artist for the rest of your life and just pick a creative career, for yourself,
Yeah, sure. I suppose I was lucky to have quite a creative upbringing. I had artists in the family. My grandmother was an artist. She worked a lot in enamels and painting and sculpting, and she was fortunate enough to have some of her stuff exhibited from time to time. So she always encouraged me to kind of pursue that, especially when I was young, between 1 and 10. And I think around 10 or 11, I kind of fell out of art in many ways. School hits, you start needing to do your GCSEs. Sorry if you can hear the ringing, by the way.
No worries. I don't think it's going to damage the audio so much.
Yeah, so good.
All right, so I think you've kind of noticed a little bit of cut between the speaking, well, because he had to answer the phone. So yeah, we're back again with the answer to the question, which was he was basically telling us his origin story, how he became an artist. So yeah, we're saying.
Yeah, sorry. I was around 10. I fell out of touch with art in many ways. Getting into secondary school, you have to start paying attention to, stuff like maths, English, more important areas of education. And I also started playing a lot of video games and stopped doing all of the artistic stuff in my free time. I ended up getting a C grade in my art studies at school, so I didn't do particularly well. And yeah, it was only until I kind of hit the end of my studies where I realized that I had completely dropped out of art. I didn't really know what I wanted to do for a career anymore. I didn't know what I wanted to get out of school. and I watched a YouTube video that Valve had uploaded probably like a few years before. I don't know when it was, maybe 12 years ago or something now. And it was all about the cafeteria that they've got there. And all I thought about offices at this point in my like life was that, you know, they had like the water dispenser and like coffee machines and desks and computers, and that's all like an office was, which didn't to a 16-year-old sound like something particularly enjoyable. But the Valve office was just full of like, they had like a snack room, they had like all of like the soda and like soft drinks you could ever want. They had catered lunches. It looked amazing. I'd never seen something that cool before. And I wanted to, you know, see if it was possible to get a job doing that. And I checked the Valve website, and they had job listings. And I don't know why, but at this point I'd played, you know, maybe 200-300 hours of TF2, but I just didn't know. I never realized that this was a job, that like there were people behind like the games that I enjoyed. And since then I just joined college. Didn't really learn anything in 2 years of college. But then university hit and I started taking it very seriously, and worked hard, and here I am.
All right, awesome. Yeah. And like, it's kind of interesting because when I was younger as well, I guess 14, 15 years old, like it's kind of funny how like media can affect, you know, how we view things. You know what I mean by that? Like, you know, at some point when I was really young, like the series Big Bang Theory really affected I was like, wow, cool. I really want to get into STEM and, you know, physics and theoretical stuff and like that, because they have such cool lives, you know, and stuff like that. But then a couple of years later, I watched Silicon Valley and I was like, oh God, coding must be so cool. You know, they all have this, you know, incubator houses. Have you watched those series, by the way?
I haven't seen Big Bang, but I've seen clips of Silicon Valley. Yeah, it's very like tech oriented, and like just startups in
chaotic,
in LA, right?
comedic, like, you know, that comedic stuff. And I really get what you're saying, you know, because sometimes watching documentaries of behind the scenes of like some games that get made, or you see the environment, you know, how people interact with each other, you know, the studio as well. Like, for example, in your, you know, scenario, this type of stuff like actually, you know, could really like affect, you know, how we see.
Well, I think the thing that interested me was it was just a video about people getting lunch and eating snacks. Like, I mean, it sounds bad, right? Because like I was more interested at the time about like a cool office rather than doing the process of like making art. Like, I think the passion for art came a lot later when I actually knew that that's what I wanted to do, and kind of connected with that in the development field. But what initially inspired me was just like, oh, I can work in a cool office all day and like eat cookies and, you know, live a very unhealthy lifestyle.
Yeah, and have every flavor of Red Bull at my disposal at any moment. You know? That sounds awesome. Yeah, and but that's actually, if you think about it, that's kind of like, you know, really genuine feeling. Like, you know, those feelings. Like, it's kind of like, you know, it has a childlike innocence to those type of, you know, visions we have. You know, when, for example, in your case as well, in my case as well, for example, when I watched those series and I got inspired, I was like, oh, cool, I want to, you know, do this stuff, instead of like, you know, sometimes, you know, we try to overanalyze it logically, you know, every aspect of everything, and it also comes to our, you know, choices of careers as well. So I think, you know, we should take all these inspirations all together and then decide, you know, what exactly is good for us. So I think, and what I mean by that, those little things that seem really unimportant, I think they're actually really important. You know, we should pay attention to those. You know, for other people, it might be different, you know?
Yeah, and I'll go back to these things that like I remember being influences and just kind of check up on them and see how I still feel about it. I think one of the most interesting things about going back to that Valve video now, like as, you know, more of a well-rounded adult, is just realizing that that's not the kind of like thing that I want anymore. Like, my attitude has changed. Like, now that I'm actually in it, I don't need like a cafeteria with loads of snacks, but it was cool back then. And also, I think one of the funniest things about that video is like, it's such a negative video too. Like, I don't think I've ever seen a studio put stuff like that out. Like, one of the guys in it is literally talking about how he would get sick from eating like the fruit and nut, like from the fruit and nut jar, because he was like, oh yeah, people are always putting their hands in, and like, I swear I'm getting sick because like so many people are touching this food. And Valve put this up as like promotional material for that studio. Like they were happy to leave in stuff that just made it look so unhealthy and negative. But they didn't care because it was cool.
But it was real.
Yeah, very real. Yeah. Yeah.
That's the point, right?
Yeah.
And well, you already kind of mentioned how your path was, but I'm kind of wondering, were you originally since you were like in high school, were you dead set on like studying art and design or going that path, or was, I don't know, maybe because of like our family or other doubts you might have because of your friends' choices, you probably, this thought comes to a lot of people's mind that, oh, all right, I'm gonna pursue something safe, like engineering or law or something, then have art on the side always, or was there anything like that for you, or from the get-go, you were just gonna go full throttle in this art direction?
I mean, during my time at school, I wasn't even really considering career. Like, I didn't even think about getting a job until I was 16, like what I wanted to do. And for most of being 15, 16, I had no clue. Like, I think it was just the generic answers that I thought you should have at that age of like, well, maybe I should be a doctor, maybe I should be a lawyer. And now I'm mature enough to realize that like there was no way I was ever going to do either of those things. Like, I'm too stupid. I don't have the brain for any sort of like research or like those big books they have to read. Like, it's not how I operate, and it was never going to happen. But I don't think I actually had a genuine passion about anything until I realized you could make games. And at the time, it was the only thing that I saw that I thought maybe I could do. And so I just put every ounce of effort into doing it. And yeah, thankfully it became a thing. But no, I didn't. I just didn't know. I suppose I didn't think about what a career would look like for me, and didn't have the perspective to realize how impactful that would be on my life at the time.
Yeah, and wow, that's really interesting, because I've heard this kind of like similar story from a lot of different artists as well, that how we really don't think art as a career at first. It's not, and I think it's mostly, of course, because of like this is like, I'm gonna be honest, like we don't really realize this, but this entertainment industry that is really big now, it's kind of a new thing. We don't really take into consideration that, yeah, sure, since 80s and 90s, yeah, there were, but this industry as a huge player in the world economy right now is pretty new. Like both entertainment, both animation, both games, just anything revolving around the entertainment industry. But now I think, and the reason that's kind of interesting and profound for me is because I wonder, like for example, kids that are like right now 10 or 12, right? Who is like, there's so many resources out there. There's so many, like the industry is now a big player, or maybe there's some kid right now who's messing around in Unreal Engine, trying to make skins for his Fortnite character or her Fortnite character, like these things, like I think we've just scratched the surface, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think I would like to say that, but I suppose we just have to see where the industry goes. I mean, right now we're looking at probably the biggest shrinking in the games industry that, like, at least I've witnessed since getting into it. Like, so many layoffs right now. Like, I would love to say it's getting bigger and getting easier to get into, but I don't know if that's the case. I think it's going to be a rough few years. I'm hoping that the industry sees health again and is able to keep growing and expanding, but I'm a little unsure about that right now. It's nice that it has formalized, though. I mean, you mentioned like the 80s and 90s. Like, I think getting into a game dev studio back then, you didn't even really necessarily need to have like loads of game dev experience. You just needed to know a bit about your field and be passionate. I'm sure, I think I remember like the people who worked on Halo talking about like what they were doing before Halo, and it's like they weren't doing game development before getting into that game. Like it was a very mixed group of people who didn't really have the experiences and education that we have to this day. It's changed so much. The process now is very like formal, and the industry's really, really matured, which is a good thing. It gives you a lot more of a route in, but I think it's a lot harder to get into the industry now than it used to be.
Yeah, and I agree with you in a lot of senses. But I think this is my kind of like hot take. Like, I think it will shift in a positive direction in the next couple of years. Like, there's going to be, as you said, there's going to be a lot of more catastrophic. I think layoffs. I think more naturally. I think because like the way I see it is, since this industry has been getting a lot of like attention, and because of it, a lot of sponsors and big corporations are investing a lot of money into the studios. So of course, a lot of gaming studios, because of this huge, because they have to impress these investors, they're not really taking those big risk, fun decisions when it comes to making their games. They're just going this stale, boring route to make games. I'm not going to mention like games or certain studios in a bad name, but I'm going to mention those who are doing a good thing, who are going really great. Like the biggest example, and I could think of, is Larian Studio. Like,
oh yeah,
I don't know if you played Baldur's Gate 3.
Yeah, twice. Yeah, I completed it twice. Yeah,
yeah, I just recently finished it. Like, oh my god, it's literally. I know this is like a really huge thing to say, but in my whole life of playing, if I have to objectively rank a game, a 10 out of 10, that's the only game that I've played that I could confidently say it's a 10 out of 10 game.
Yeah.
Like, oh my god, it was so good that other game dev companies and studios got salty for how perfect this game was, and they were worried that the gamers would demand the same level of standard out of them. It's a testament to the level of like the irony of it, just what's going on in game industry. And I think in the future, like after like a while, when these big companies, these big huge franchises, and we're seeing a downfall of a lot of them, actually. A lot of these franchises that we had a lot of fun, growing up playing them. And I think, well, those investors will, after some time, or not those investors, the studios will realize that, hey, we actually need to connect to the fan base and make games that people really like. Like a great example of that is Cyberpunk. Catastrophic, launch. Bad launch, but right now, if you play this, it's genuinely like one of the best single player games you could ever play.
Yeah, I played it recently with the DLC and all the updates, and it was extremely impressive. Yeah, like how they've turned that the launch around was remarkable. And also, I think what people don't realize is that, well, maybe the gamers don't, but man, to work through that criticism. The developers, I know that a lot of developers decided to leave afterwards, and I wouldn't blame them. The crunch did sound brutal, but the ones who decided to stay and work through that negative online criticism, I don't know how they've done it. Like, it's really admirable, because it's been your life for however many years you've been working on that project, and just to see like hatred and vitriol, I mean, it's. I can't imagine it. I really can't.
Yeah, it's crazy to think about. Like, actually, when you put it that way, like literally every project you work on is a part of. It's a chunk of your life.
Yeah,
it's really weird when you think about it that way.
Yeah, I've been working at Rocksteady for 3.5 years now. So like that project is most of my career up till this point. It's most of my adult life. That'll change as I get older, sure. But like, right now that kind of matters to me. And I'm sure how people feel about our project is going to impact me. Yeah.
Yeah. And you just got to wait in a couple of years and see, I think, after a while, I don't know. I'm not saying from experience, but I'm just saying this from what I've heard from the experience of others. I think it's going to be really crazy when you look back at your career after a while, especially like, when there's so many projects you're going to work on, so many different teams are going to be, it's going to be really interesting, right?
Yeah, it'll be a very cool range of experiences, I hope.
Yeah, and all right, so here's another thing. What is your main branch of design that you're focusing on right now? And tell us about your experience from the start of it until now. And of course, in the introduction, I mentioned that you're an environment artist, and well, the big piece that really got viral for you was the Disco Elysium piece as well. So we all know you're doing 3D environment, but how was it in the beginning? Like first, was it first 3D? Was it then later on you branched out into 3D environment? Now that you're in 3D environment, what sort of environment do you want to focus on? Do you want to, go like, sci-fi environments, medieval environments, like, just how would you see this kind of roadmap, branching out?
Yeah, you've asked an interesting time, I suppose. Whenever I feel like I finish a project, it's you feel like you're at a crossroads and you don't really know where that path's going to lead. But I suppose it would be better if I go back to the beginning to answer the first part of your question. Yeah, I did get into this, and at like university, I had the options open to me of like character, concept, environment, and that was the kind of three routes that we saw at the time as being like availabilities as artists. And yeah, getting into environment art just felt natural to me. I've always had just more of a leaning interest into environmental things than characters. And yeah, I found that I was much better at it as well. I still to this day have barely done characters. I made like an armored Norse warrior for like a castle project I did, but that's the only character I've ever done, really. And even then it was using like a base mesh and just putting like armor on top of them. But no, I just got into that. I remember hearing at the time it was slightly easier to get in because there's often more environment jobs than character art jobs, and that sounded like a good thing for me to choose as well. Like if I can find more work in this, then that might make the getting in easier. But that was just a small detail that didn't really motivate me into it. It was more that I was interested in it. And throughout uni, I just kept doing environments. I definitely leaned into exteriors for a long time, but then found probably the most success at the end of uni working on interiors. So like the subway station and the Wills Room project were like the things that kind of got me work post uni. And it was easy scale to do for a portfolio piece. Like, it's just one room. It's nice and contained. You have a lot of control over like how the space looks. Both, just the Wills Room has like a kind of a window out into the real world. So it kind of makes the location feel a little bit bigger than it is. But ever since I kind of got into the field, like into the industry, finding the time to do environments has been really tough. So I've only done 2 environments since I got into the industry, which is the forest, I think, and the disco scene, just because they just take so long. I think those projects took between like 8 and 9 months of dev time, like just whenever I can do it. So I leaned into doing more asset-y type stuff for a while, just to see if I could build up my skill set in like texturing and like more realistic detailing. Especially like the swords was a lot of fun. Again, just saw it in a museum and thought it was cool. I'm occasionally just influenced by something cool that I've seen, not necessarily like what's doable within a tight production, time period. But yeah, it's I haven't really thought about my portfolio and like what I've been working on as like a branch of design I've focused on. I've always just kind of done whatever I haven't really known how to do, I suppose. So like the forest was, I don't know how to do any foliage stuff. I should make foliage stuff and maybe make a scene out of it. The swords was, I hadn't really done hard surface and weaponry type things before, or like semi-organic hard surface where you've got kind of like more rounded shapes. Just trying to learn a new thing with each project. I suppose the Disco Elysium scene is probably the closest thing to like something I already knew how to do, because it's just like another interior, very similar to Will's Room in terms of like scope, just with 5 years of experience tacked on and all that stuff.
Yeah, definitely. And what's really interesting about your portfolio is that there's like the diversity of styles of things that are on it. There's the Wheels Room, there's a train, there's the swords, there's the foliage, there's the vending machine, there's this Elysium one, and they're all really good in its own. And because the thing is, as juniors, you hear a lot of things. Other seniors tell you that, oh, get niche, do that and do this, and I guess, right now, if I have to, I guess, make a conclusion on, what to do actually is to just focus on making things that you really enjoy, because when you
Yeah.
do that, you're really going to nail it and make those pieces pop out.
Yeah. Also, I mean, I would say that there is like an argument to be made for going niche. Like, if you're really into like foliage art, I remembered after I did the forest, like there was a lot of interest in like, hey, do you want to come do foliage at this studio or foliage at that studio? And yeah, there are specialisms with environment art you can go into if you're passionate about it. But at the time when I saw those jobs come through, I couldn't think of anything worse. Like going to a studio to just make trees or just make like bushes.
Some people love that, actually.
Oh, no, some people do, but for me, that sounded like hell. Like I finished that project not really loving the process and feeling like, yeah, I don't think it's for me. Like I don't think doing foliage is for me. I'm happy to have it as like a part of my skill set, but when I work in the industry, I want to be at a job where I'm given the freedom to jump between different things. Like I don't want it just to be one thing. And that isn't really a job you can get everywhere. Like whatever job I work in, there's going to be like we need you to do mostly this thing, but maybe on the side you can like, dabble on other bits and pieces. But yeah, I would always encourage everyone just to do the thing they're passionate about, because that will mean that the work gets done. And especially when you're working on this stuff in your free time, like building a portfolio it's difficult. And if you're not passionate about the work that you're making, you're just not going to want to do it.
Yeah, definitely. And well, here's another interesting question that kind of ties to the subject that you just talked about.
Okay.
Which is, how does your design process usually go anytime you want to start working on a new design project? Like basically as an environment artist, what does the structure of your pipeline look like? What steps do you take, step by step, till you get to the finished result?
Usually just starts with reference gathering, block out. It's so generic. Like I'm not doing anything particularly crazy. I don't even know sometimes where the idea kind of crops up, but like whenever there's an idea that appears, yeah, it's just the generic like ref gather, find the interesting details. If past the ref gathering stage it's still interesting, then I'll just power on. I'm not someone who goes through a lot of ideas. Like I definitely have a graveyard of like old art pieces that were never finished, but that's pretty small compared to the stuff that has actually been finished. Like if I get an idea and I kind of commit to it past the reference gathering stage, it more often than not gets followed through to completion. And yeah, I wouldn't say I've got like a crazy different process to anyone, but when it comes to the large scale scene stuff like the disco scene, it was some weeks I would prefer to be in engine, doing engine stuff like, asset placement, moving stuff around, tweaking stuff like your tilables or your materials or getting animations and stuff like that. And other weeks I'd be like, I'm so sick of being in Unreal. I just want to be in Painter. I just want to make assets. Like I just try to reward myself with the stuff that's that I want to do at the time. Whatever's just most interesting to me to make sure I get through it. There are going to be weeks where you have to do the stuff that you don't want to do. But it's how these projects get done.
Yeah. And yeah, I can understand what you're trying to say, because there's one thing about 3D environment art that sometimes, you start working on a project step by step and you go through all this stuff. And sometimes when it comes to maybe texturing or sculpting or, just figuring out how to optimize the environment, you hit a roadblock that you need to technically learn. So, and usually in every environment you work on, that sort of, new knowledge that you need and you don't have will arise. That sort of problem comes. And that alone is really going to, depending on the subject that you're learning, whether you like it or not. Maybe if you're into texturing, then it's just going to be a fun thing to learn. But if you're not, for example, it's going to take a lot of energy and time from your whole process. But I was wondering, how did you manage that thing? Just like you kind of explained, how you went about, doing your environments. But what happens, when, for example, you hit a roadblock that you you hit a problem that you don't know nothing about, and you have to kind of adapt to that. And there's a deadline, obviously.
Yeah. I actually don't work, at least in my own stuff. Like, I don't work to deadlines. But if, for example, we were talking about like a studio gig or something, then I would talk to someone who I would usually just ask people. Like, the industry is totally open to communication about these problems. If I'm having an issue in my personal work, I'll reach out to friends who know more than me or know different things to me, like who are branched into different parts of environment art. Like, the amount of environment artists that I know who have wildly different portfolios to me and different like skill sets, it's crazy. Like, no one environment artist is exactly the same. So everyone's experienced different things and tried different things. Occasionally, like if I see someone on ArtStation who's done something, like I really want to get that right for my scene, I'll just message them. Hopefully they respond. I think it's just all about communication and openness, and hopefully if you help enough people out, then they might, others might help you along your journey too. And in studio, it's usually, if you're working with a good team, then yeah, if you post a problem, people will often flock to you, and you can get maybe 3 or 4 people looking at this issue and trying to find a way through whatever roadblock you're hitting.
Yeah, definitely. And it's kind of like, Baldur's Gate. In the Act 1 of your journey, you help this NPC who you don't know even is going to matter or not. And in Act 3, you realize they're going to assist you in the final battle. Who knows,
Exactly, yeah.
And yeah. And all right, so that's really good. I mentioned Baldur's Gate again. And because right now we were entering the general art chat section of the podcast, which is, where we usually, talk about just random stuff, And of course, the first random stuff, which isn't really random at this point, is Baldur's Gate. All right, so tell me. Before you tell me, I need to give a warning. In the next couple of minutes, we're going to talk heavy spoiler subjects about Baldur's Gate 3. So if you want to skip that, go in the captions and see the timestamp where we're going to finish this thing. So with that out of the way, here we go. So what class of character did you pick? And also just what major decisions did you make? What's your party? All right, tell me everything. Drop the juice.
I am the most boring human alive, so I did just good boy, nice. I can't remember what class I played for the first playthrough. Maybe it was Paladin, I think. Just generic good boy for the first run, save all the tieflings, do all the good stuff, and then immediate flip side, full evil chaos Dark Urge for the second playthrough. I ended up doing Dark Urge as a monk, which was a weird playthrough. Like, the characteristics of the Dark Urge doesn't really fit monk, I don't think. But yeah, just I wanted to experience like the polar opposites of the game, to really see what the devs had worked in to allow you to complete the game with killing like all of the NPCs. Something that one of my favorite games, and my friends always get frustrated for me bringing up, is Fallout New Vegas. And what I love that's different about it to other like Bethesda titles is that you can kill every NPC in the world, and the game pretty much adapts to it and still continues. Like, you can't mess the game up by doing that. Like, there's always a route for you to choose to get like an ending, no matter how bad or messed up it is. And I really respected that in Baldur's Gate, especially like it's a much newer game. So much time has gone into like tying all these people together in conversations. And the best part about the Dark Urge campaign was just like seeing all of the people drop off, realizing how much like you miss out on by just everyone being dead. And the game still runs, like it still provides an ending for you. It still gives you options and even new stuff based on the decisions that you make. It's such an impressive piece of like designed game. Not to mention it's gorgeous as well.
Yeah, the environments just blew my mind. The amount of details, the assets, just everything.
Yeah.
And there's not even that much loading screens in the game. That's the craziest part for me.
Yeah, and the loading screens are fast too. It's a very well optimized game.
exactly, like the amount of like every single detail like that. Yeah, it's a 10 out of 10 game. I don't know what else to say. Like the amount of things to do. Like there was this person on YouTube who played as a troll bard, and in every conversation, you can go to character select and choose your other party members. They would He would make all his other party members to steal from that NPC he's talking to, and
Yeah,
start
yeah, yeah.
dancing behind them, and then go about their quest. And instead of like trying to persuade or anything, it was just so funny.
It gives you so much freedom to do all that
It's
stuff.
insane the amount of creativity you can pull off in this game. Like it's
Yeah,
absolutely insane. Like my favorite thing that I found out on my own, which blew my tiny mind, was in the Grim Forge when you're trying to free Absolute Near, right? That's like pompous guy, that elf who was
yeah,
trapped in the gas chamber. When you frame, there's a cutscene that he kind of throws this little gnome in the lava, this little female gnome in the lava. And
yeah,
when he did that, and I was in my playthrough really deep, and I got so much, I was like, oh no, what should I do? So I did my loading screen to see if there was any dialogue options to do, and I was like, no, this guy just kills her. But then in the bottom left, I saw there was a bunch of options. In the middle of the cutscene, you can just, like in real life, that how would you go? You can attack and stop that, and I
yeah.
did, and it blew my mind. That
And on top of that, then if you speak to that NPC, they have dialogue. Like
yes,
they're completely written. I think something interesting that people have just found out recently is they've. I think that they kind of designed out this functionality, but Minthara, like the bad paladin that you can recruit on
oh
like the
yeah,
evil run.
oh yeah,
You're not really supposed to be able to have her and characters like Karlach at the same time, because I think Karlach and Will leave the camp if you take like the goblin route and you bring all those people in. But they have dialogue between Minthara and Karlach. Like they have written all that stuff. They did all of that work before they even knew how you were going to recruit these characters into your parties. So despite the fact that they technically can't play together, people have kind of like glitched it so that you can get them both in the party. And just so much love was put into this. Like, yeah, no matter where you look or what you change, there will be like reactiveness to your decisions, and it really makes you feel like you're influencing the world in a meaningful way.
yeah. And one of the points that I could right now, make much more clear when I talked about the state of game industry is that, like games like Baldur's Gate, Disco Elysium, these are timeless games. And speaking of Fallout New Vegas, actually, Fallout New Vegas is one of my favorite games of all time. I actually, even though I really love it, I wouldn't say it's a timeless game. But there are people who are like into RPGs, and they played that game from 2010, and they're like, oh my god, this is so cool for its time. And yeah, Fallout New Vegas is really crazy, has crazy good writing, and the settings, just everything about that game is just perfect for me. Like that's it. Like subjectively, that's my favorite game of all time. Fallout New
Yeah,
Vegas, by the way. I played that since
yeah.
I was 12, and I'm 26 now, by the way.
Man, I
And
actually played it. Like, so I finished the Disco Elysium project, and I don't know, I just kind of had a nostalgia kick. So that's what I've been playing like the last couple of weeks. Like,
oh really?
just playing New Vegas games. Because I was like, yeah, I just want to re-experience that. Like, I had to install like the 10 mods that stop it from crashing every
Oh
five
my god!
minutes.
I
Because
should
like,
definitely ask you for those, because one of my big problems is that every time I play, I get this infinite loading screen glitch, and I just like, I guess we have to delete it again.
yeah, the
Oh,
Nexus has so many mods that will just like fix the game basically. So I had like the most crash-free experience ever playing it this time. It's not the easiest thing to set up, but like, I digress. Like it's really nice to go back to the classics and experience those games again. Like as you get older, like you do look at them differently. It can be hard to recommend those older games to people because just the times have changed so much. Like as I would love my friends to try Knights of the Old Republic too. Like that's one of my favorite RPGs too. And it's just too old. Like it's the combat mechanics are so clunky. Some of the animation work's incredible, but like it's just it doesn't really apply to like a modern audience at all. And it's one of those really old, like one of the first 3D RPGs. And yeah, it's those old systems don't really translate very well. Like you look at something like Baldur's Gate, and it's beautifully designed, it's beautifully laid out. It makes sense to people who play it. It's very intuitive. Back then, it wasn't. Like people expected you to have like a foundational knowledge of like the D&D rule set, because that's what that all of those mechanics are built off. But you play games now, and it's they will hold your hand through those experiences.
Oh yeah, I know what you mean. Like, well, as I said, they try to make games, very stale and boring when it comes. Basically, what I'm trying to say, they really don't want to take risks when it comes to innovation. So they just stick with the same formula that has been going on and make the money, out of just the brand name of it. As I said, I don't want to mention names of studios or games that have negative, things that I'm talking about. But I'm only talking about the positive ones. Yeah,
I would say as well that like even if there is like a studio or a game that you're thinking is not putting out something that you're happy with, it's I think so much of the time it's important to remember that it's most of these decisions that are being made are not by like the developers, the people who are making like content for the project. So many of those decisions are like out of the hands of people who put these things together. And even if a studio is putting out something that gamers don't like, it's like don't shoot the devs on Twitter. They were literally just doing their job. Like they get paid to make the stuff that they're told to make. And they do get to influence the games, and it's not like they're all powerless to stuff, but a lot of those overarching decisions can have big impacts. And devs just try to make the best thing that they can given the freedom that they're given.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I didn't mean anything like that. I mean, I'm
no, I know you don't. I'm speaking to the general crazy gamer audience. Yeah. Which definitely listens to this podcast.
Like there was this, I saw this comment like one time on Twitter, like someone posted an asset they worked on a Valorant map, which there was a bunch of crates and a cloth over it. And some person was really angry. I said, when I knife this cloth thing, it doesn't leave a print. And it was just so angry emojis and stuff like that. Okay, calm down.
Don't worry. Like it's a game. Just have fun with it.
Exactly. And but the craziest thing is that I'm really trying to think if I found any bugs in the Baldur's Gate, but no. Like the only problem that I found in Baldur's Gate 3 technically was the memory leaks that happened in Act 3. Because it was really obvious that they kind of course, because of deadlines, they had to kind of rush things a bit. Even though it was rushed, it's compared to the industry standard, it is still perfect,
Yeah.
And in Act 3, I don't know if you experienced it, but there was so much, sometimes game gets laggy.
Yeah, it slowed down. I mean, Baldur's Gate as well, like even like now, like I wouldn't want to work on optimizing a city like Baldur's Gate. Like as an environment, the amount of detail, complexity, like individual city wall blocks being modeled, like there is so much that went into creating that space, and they've really injected so much detail. And optimizing a space like that has got to be very, very difficult. Like shout out to anyone who worked on just the city. Like it's would have been some people who worked there probably the entire time they were there, like worked just exclusively on Baldur's Gate, I can imagine. Tough stuff.
Yeah, and I couldn't, like the only way, all right, I'm just going to say this to anyone who doesn't know how Baldur's Gate is. Like basically imagine, like if you're into role-playing, you can literally do anything in real life that you could do in the game as well if you were in certain situations. Like not technically everything. Like you can't suddenly I don't know, start doing Gangnam Style in front of the enemies, just when it comes to technicality. Of course, you can't do everything. Wait, actually as a bard? All right, the point is, it's the closest thing to a role-playing game that you could ever play, and it is just a complete masterpiece. And I'm sure even decades people will still play it. Because I went on the Steam pages of Baldur's Gate 1 and 2. I read some really interesting things about those games. Did you know that in Baldur's Gate 1, and that game came out 1997, 1998?
Yeah.
You could get the files of your, the folder of the files of the profile of character you made in Baldur's Gate 1 and import it in Baldur's Gate 2. And if you, for example, hit or steal from an NPC in Baldur's Gate 1, when you upload this, when you get this files to the second installment of the game, the new NPCs in the game react to your actions in the previous game. Imagine just the creativity they put in.
Yeah, that's incredible. Times. I didn't know about that. That's so cool.
I recently found it out.
Because I think a lot of people, at least from my generation, would say that like that kind of like save game transferring and like taking your actions and like the consequences from the past was like a BioWare thing. Like would have probably first experienced it with like Mass Effect or Dragon Age of like, here are the decisions I made in the first game and it's going to impact like the world and the setting in the second game. But oftentimes it was so cool to see, but I think if you compared it to something like Baldur's Gate 1 or 2, it sounds like it could be like quite superficial compared to what they were doing back then.
Yeah, and it's kind of really interesting because a lot of people also told me that you should give Divinity Original Sins or something like that. The second game, they said that was a masterpiece as well.
Yeah, Divinity 2 was awesome.
Yeah, and these games were like there's no like I'm trying to wrap my head around the fact that these two games at some point were being made at the same time in Larian's studio. It's insane.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Larian is a lot bigger, I think, than people expect as well. Like they've got a lot of studios, and it does.
In total, they have like I heard 600 staff or more. I'm not sure. I just heard.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of people for like. I mean, I suppose it's not really. If you look at the scope of the game, it's
exactly.
It's actually probably feels a little small, but it's what is required, these days for large scale games. I think the independence that they had for like at a high level for Baldur's Gate as well has just been, incredible. Like it's really helped that game flourish, not having as many voices. I think that they've had a really strong set of like the developers there who have been able to make the decisions like for the game. And that's made it such a cool experience.
Yeah. Also, fun fact: Skyrim was made by only I think 100 or 110 people or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
If you see the documentary of the making of Skyrim on YouTube, like you see, there's not many people worked on that game. It's kind of crazy on a game like Skyrim.
Yeah. Well, to go back to Fallout New Vegas, like we're talking about, that was made in less than a year.
11 months.
Yeah. Yeah, crazy. Absolutely crazy.
Even
and by a team who hadn't actually worked with that engine before. Like that was all fresh to them. Just won't be done these days. It can't be done.
Like you could even say, like, of course they got a lot of important assets already from Fallout 3. So even though the amount of details when it comes to writing and the quests and everything, and not just that, there's this channel on YouTube that shows COD content of every game. And the COD content that was cut out from Fallout New Vegas was crazy. Like the map was supposed to be much bigger. There were so much more quests and stuff with the Legion, and like just like I don't know what to say.
I think the character Ulysses from one of the DLCs had to be cut from the main game because he had too much dialogue. It didn't fit on the disc. Like they needed to move him off to a DLC basically and kind of restructure that stuff to get it all to work. Because they were working under like they didn't get what we have now, which is digital downloads and being able to put like hundreds of gigabytes on like that. Just freedom of putting it onto a CD.
Yeah, I don't think it's just about the memories as well. I think it's also about the fact that they probably were on a tight deadline. That even though if they could add it, they had to still, just to make the environments, the quests, and everything. They had to. I think they were forced to, like not just with the Ulysses, was with the two other main characters of the story.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah.
Elijah and the other guy in the band is Joshua Graham. Yeah, I really love that character, Joshua Graham. He's such a badass guy.
Incredible
writing.
Yeah, incredible.
And I think my favorite, if I have to name one DLC that was my favorite, was the Dead Money. The writing of it was just superb. I don't know what else to say. Like, it was crazy.
Yeah,
it was good times. Yeah, all right. We're reminiscing a bit too much, I guess. And with that out of the way, let me also ask a couple of questions about this Elysium, which is kind of like one of the center point subjects of this.
Sure, yeah, I've just been waiting.
Yeah, just bubbling up in the pot while we're talking about other stuff. So how did your playthrough of Disco Elysium went?
Well, I don't. I'll avoid any start like type of spoilers, but I think I was being very cautious. I think the my first kind of introduction to the world was so it was such a jarring experience in a good way of like this is such a different world and you need to kind of respect that it's not the real world, it's not real life, it's the world itself is so different to ours that you have to go in with a bit of a different mindset. I think there was one tooltip on like a loading screen that really helped me enjoy the game more, which was like police officers in this world have like kind of more freedom than you think, and they're more willing to like let you do difficult or like weird stuff because there is an element of fear there. That's not exactly what it said, but along those lines of like, yeah, you just do what you feel is right, like even if it does sound a little crazy or does sound off the beaten track. Because I realized early on I was very much apologizing to everyone, like this intense guilt hearing about like what you may have been involved in and trying to make amends, but like it's pointless. In many ways it was pointless to just apologize because it's not going to change the realities of the things, like what your actions have, they're finished, they're done, you weren't there for it. So yeah, I just had an experience of my first playthrough was so enjoyable because I realized that I could just have the freedom that I've not had in lots of other games. Even though you're just playing this specific character, like you can do some crazy stuff. Like you can say some insane things to people. You can get reactions and dialogue that you've never experienced before and learn about one of what I would say is the most interesting worlds in gaming. Like I'm just infatuated by the whole design of the place. Obviously, the art style was the thing that actually got me to get into the game in the beginning. It was a real life-changing experience playing that game.
Yeah, definitely. And for me, the writing was really like just like it was really unique, I would say, and it was really, of course, strong. And I guess from hearing from your point of view, I think you kind of did a similar thing as me. I think that you probably got surprised when suddenly there, with the voice in your head said, "You're a sorry cop." Then you're just like saying sorry to everyone,
Yeah, and it was like, like screw that. I'm not gonna be that person. Like I'm gonna get my job done. I'm gonna try to do it right, but I'm gonna be unapologetic about it. Like I have bigger things to deal with right now than like apologizing for those past mistakes. Like actions will speak louder than words, and getting this done will be the best apology I could make to anyone involved, really, is like having it mean something.
Yeah, and regarding like the socio-political stance you could take as a character in the game, they like regardless of what thing you choose, you become a centrist, you become a fascist, you become a communist, it doesn't matter. It's the voice in your head will ultimately like make fun of you. And it's really
man. I mean, I often like leaned into ultra liberalism just because it was the funniest thing. Like it was just being on like the money grind, like, it's all about making stacks to fight, despite the fact that like you are the poorest man in Revachol. Like you're scrounging bottles off the street to like put into a dispenser to make like 10p a time. And like, despite that, you're still like all about the hustle, the grind. Like that's going to get you somewhere. And I just love it. The political compass that they have is so interesting because it mocks every angle. Like no side is right. Every side has flaws to it. Mainly because they're all kind of political extremes. Like I suppose maybe it's a bit of commentary from them. I don't know, but it just mocks the extremes of any kind of political leaning.
Yeah, and there's one thing I think I forgot to ask you about in the previous section was, what were some of your biggest challenges making the Disco Elysium scene?
For challenges, I think it was the delivering something that fans of the game would enjoy. I think that was the biggest struggle. Like it can be hard enough to make like a cool environment piece, but for a fan of the game, I really wanted to make sure that people saw details that they could connect with and would remind them about the game and bring them back to like a moment. It was, yeah, it did require more time and a lot more thought when I was working on like individual assets to see if there was a way for me to inject something special for them in. Thankfully, there's so much good artwork for me to reference, but yeah, there was a lot of pressure there. I didn't want to do an injustice to something that like has already like. I think I remember seeing a comment that was like, "Why did you do this? Like, why did you make this as a piece of art? Like, the game's already there. Like, you know." And to an extent, I was kind of like, "Oh, I kind of agree with that." Like, but my attitude in the beginning was like I was going to apply my own, you know, perspective, my own style to it, and try to learn a bit from how their style was and see if I could project it. Anyway, and yeah, like I didn't want it to be a one-to-one recreation. I wanted to make sure that people would see this and think like it brings them back to disco a little bit. It's different enough where it kind of has its own like value because it's not just like a full recreation, but also just something that holds up to the quality of what was there originally. Like I couldn't leave stuff in there that just didn't look good, like, or rushed. It needed to really be some of my best work. And I do feel like it's one of my better pieces. Like I definitely started to slow down on like the prop quality towards the end because I was like, I've done so many props for the scene. Like I don't have the willpower to do anymore. I just need to get this done. But yeah, I couldn't put out something that wasn't like right. It had to actually be a tribute and not just like a basic bit of quick fan art.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, you know, regarding the person who said like the game in Word has been done before in 3D, which technically he's or her, I don't know, they were right. But I think, you know, the main thing with the environment is, I don't know, because of the scales and the way it was made, I think it could be used in like making like, you know, cinematic teasers out of like, you know, different like, you know, dialogues or scenes of the game, or maybe even like you could do a little tease, like a little teaser of, you know, from the first person view of, you know, Harry
Yeah.
and waking up, and it's in a first person view, you know, because one thing that I've noticed that is a trend when it comes to, you know, successful fan arts and just in general things that really pop out and get viral is when you take a game, for example, let's say, I don't know, Baldur's Gate 1, all right? And you take a scene of it and you recreate it in, I don't know, I guess everyone's working with Unreal Engine, so let's say Unreal Engine, but in a first-person view with, you know, modern, you know, technical, you know, graphics and stuff like that. So you took something that was isometric and kind of like grungy and stuff like that, and you turned it into a new, like, you know, much more palatable, like actually palatable. By palatable, I don't mean the original, like the Disco Elysium thing wasn't palatable,
modern.
But you get the point.
Yeah, more modern.
Yeah, exactly. And like one thing I had in mind that I wanted to do, it was to do a 3D environments, you know, practice of one of the environments of the game Machinarium. Do you remember the game Machinarium from 2009?
No, never heard of it.
Oh god, you should definitely play it. It's Amnesia Studio, I think was the name of the studio.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, maybe I'll explain a little bit of the game, maybe you remember it. It was like this little robot that gets dumped in the junkyard first, and we have to collect our body parts and go to the city and save everyone. It was a point-and-click adventure, you know, game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, not clicking any bells, but I'm interested.
Dude, you should definitely... All right, after this podcast, I'll show you... You'll Google it and you'll see what I mean.
Okay.
But basically, what I'm trying to say, it was a 2D game, all right? Point-and-click adventure game, so it wasn't in 3D at all. So if me as a 3D environment artist be successful in taking a piece of that world and making it into 3D, I'm sure that's going to get viral. If I do a good job, of course, you know, because it has a lot of fan base. It's very well loved, and there hasn't been much 3D studies of that thing.
Yeah,
so,
I suppose what I realized after doing this piece, because I've never done fan art really before, like this is my first piece of like art that is directly a tribute to another piece of media, is that when it comes to like the purpose of it as well, it just needs to like, people just need to think it's cool. Like that's all. Like as long as people look at it and think like, you know, get some pleasure out of it, that's all the purpose needs to be. Like They just need to look at it, and if it brings them back to memories of the game, that's like great. Some people have said that. If they just look at it and think, oh, that's cool, I hadn't seen something like that before, that's all it needs to be. It just needs to be something cool for people to look at. Like, it's art. It doesn't need to have a practical purpose. Like, it's all about pleasure to the eyes. Like, you wouldn't look at like a canvas and say, like, what's the point of like the Mona Lisa? It's there as like a piece of, it's an important piece of artwork that a lot of people enjoy and think it's a technical masterpiece. That's all art has to be.
Yeah, exactly. And speaking of that, talking about art and artists and stuff like that, the next question is, who are some of your favorite artists and designers that have inspired you the most?
I've been very, very fortunate in my kind of career to get to know better some of the people that have inspired me. So when I was getting into the industry, two kind of portfolios, well, I suppose three portfolios that really kind of spoke to me when I was trying to get work in the field was Jacob Norris, Ben Keeling, and Martin Teichmann, who I believe you interviewed, I think, actually, like, really recently.
Martin Teichmann?
Yeah, again, like these were like the portfolios that I saw, and I was like, I got to be like these guys. Like, even Martin, I emailed when I was a student to be like, hey, like, is my portfolio okay? Like, am I going to be able to make it? Like, what's the route I should take? Same with Jacob. And since then, I've been lucky enough to, I worked with Ben at Rocksteady for a couple of years. And Jacob, I've worked with him on kind of various projects since, graduating and getting into the field. But those guys really, their portfolios were so interesting to me because they had all that range and variety that I've been trying to build up myself. Like, they had done all manner of things. Like, Jacob had like scenes, he had foliage, he had hard surface, he had all of these really interesting things that I was like, I want to know how to do that. Like, I don't feel like a well-rounded artist until I know I can do all of those things too. Same with Ben, like, just so much variety in the portfolio. And Martin had just some of the coolest work from like Naughty Dog, which I think for a lot of people studying at the same time as me, like Naughty Dog, Santa Monica, people just looking at that as like the peak, that's where we should all be, to get work. Like, that's the goal. And I think as I've, obviously with the disco scene being prominent now, Alexander Rostov, just huge inspiration. Like, one of the first 2D artists that I felt like the work really, really speaks to me. Like, I just love the style. I'm obsessed with it. I even have like a bunch of the art that he like made for the game hanging in my house because like I want to see it daily. Like, I want to see those pieces because they bring me a lot of joy to look at and they inspire me. I'd say that's like a good foundation for where I'm at right now.
Yeah, also shout out to Alexander Rostov. He was on the podcast like in the summer of 2022, I think. Incredible episode. Go give it a listen if you haven't. Like, I'm not sure which episode exactly, what number was it, but it was in the 190s. Yeah, 190 to 200. It's between those, in that range, I'm 100% sure.
Actually, talking about like the podcast stuff, like who's your favorite person that you've interviewed? Who's been the best? I mean, obviously, I know that you don't want to rank like your guests, right? But like,
yeah, I know.
Was there one that really stuck out of like, oh man, that was just great. Like, that conversation was sick.
Oh god, there were a couple of episodes that the flow was really nice.
Yeah.
And like, here's the thing, with the interviewing and podcasting, as you have a lot of different guests. First of all, the host has his own personality or her personality, and every guest also is a different personality. So always the chemistry is going to be different, But sometimes the chemistry just hits, and sometimes it's with the person that you wouldn't expect at all, So if I have to just name a couple of episodes from the top of my head, is one that can come to my mind is with Tiago Klafke. He's actually my instructor in 3D environment as well. We spoke for 2 hours.
Legend as well.
Or something.
Yeah.
Laura Gallagher was amazing as well. She's a 3D artist in Montreal. Montreal? Yes, Montreal. Yeah. And I spoke with her for 2 hours. I think that was the longest episode. Anna Moshak, she's an Ukrainian illustrator who's now in Germany. I had 2 hours with her as well. I'm not just talking about the length, in general,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
if I have
Well,
to talk about,
I suppose the length does to an extent like
yeah,
influence it, because like the longer that, like, I mean, obviously if people don't have the time,
mhm,
that's one thing, but like if they have the time and the conversation can just keep kind of flowing naturally,
yeah.
that's awesome.
2 other honorable mentions I could name was one of them was Ahmed Al-Duri. He was really fun to talk to. Here's how I measure like how fun sometimes the conversations get. Like I kind of have like a really sometimes bad ADHD in especially when I'm playing RPG games or
Yeah,
trying
yeah,
to
yeah.
just talk about different stuff, with my friends. It sometimes seeps through my podcasting as well, but I've tried to control it. And one of my measuring sticks of how fun a conversation is how random the topics get. And if I have to name a couple of episodes as well, like Ahmed Al-Duri, as I said, we talked about so many different things, aliens. Oh my god, like just so many random stuff. And also Lola Yiting Zhang, she's also a concept artist at I think I had a call with her from Seattle. She's working at 343 Industries on Halo and stuff like that. I think, I'm not sure. And that was really fun too. And like there were so many episodes by now, like 250. Oh my god. Yeah, my goal is to
Yeah.
get to 1,000 initially someday.
1,000.
Yeah,
Really? Wow, man.
I'm 1/4 of the way there, man.
Yeah, you are. I mean, it's very impressive. I was looking through the
Well,
amount
thanks,
of
man.
podcasts you've done. It's very cool. And I was thinking as well, like, what got you into podcasting? Like, what was the I want to interview artists? Like, where did that come from?
Well, just to give you like a short but sweet answer, because and the reason I say short is because the listeners of the podcast have heard this story like 100 times.
Sure, sure.
So we're sick of it. But long story short, there are many reasons, but one original story I could give was there were some very well known artists, like traditional artists in my hometown. I'm originally from Iran. My hometown was Shiraz, so. And I actually interviewed that guy, by the way, Adel Yazdi, the artist I talk about, traditional artist. He was a painter,
Yeah.
a sculptor. Like he was an all-around, just an amazing. Like his whole house was an art piece. His every room was a workshop, and he was residing in an old, like traditional house, like from 100 to 100 years ago. So it was a really weird, trippy place. And in my head at the time, I was like, wow. If I could, I would have made documentaries out of each and every one of these artists. And in that certain house, there was other artists' house that lived there, and no one knew them. I mean, thankfully now people know them a little bit because of social media, but at the time no one knew them, and they were like amazing artists. And that was one of my reasons I really got into it. And later on, after a couple of years while I was here, and actually the podcast started at 14th of March of 2020. I know it's such a cliche story. Out of COVID, out of quarantine, I started.
Sure.
This project. But to me, like the main thing was I'm kind of like to talk to different people.
I suppose with COVID as well, actually, like this is a great way to ensure that you have regular conversations with human beings, which wasn't an easy thing to have during COVID.
Yeah, definitely. But I mean, even if the COVID wasn't there, I'm just genuinely interested and curious, and love to listen to different artists. And by artists, I mean just creative people, because I had architects on this podcast. I had, so many different things. I had game developers. I had even people who are super good at like social media. I brought one of them on to just give advice and guide other artists, how to, get their social media game up, so they're just genuinely curious, and throughout this podcast, I've made a lot of good friends. I made a lot of good connections. Like I never really cared that much about the views or the likes or followers and stuff like that. But also one other thing there's so many reasons I could tell you like why I'm still doing it. Is also another big reason is that to me it would be really funny that in 100 years people would be maybe someone like me would be really interested. How was the normal day-to-day life and discussions of, I don't know, artists from 100 years ago? And this is literally a time capsule for that. If you think about it.
Yeah,
because
it's timeless. The internet ain't going anywhere.
Yeah, like, I don't know if you know this guy on YouTube, David Hoffman. He's this documentary. He's really old now. He's a documentary maker from like since Vietnam War, and some of his interviews have gone super viral. And his whole philosophy and point was making time capsules of like normal everyday life and conversations, which at the time people didn't give a shit at all. And now they're getting a lot of views. Because right now, imagine right now you had like an access to an archive of conversations and people from like 1800s, you know, that would be really interesting, right?
Yeah, incredibly interesting. I mean, I hope that people still find like our conversation, for example, interesting in 100 years. I suppose the ones that you were describing earlier, like the ones that you felt were great conversations, like those were probably the ones that like stick out the most to people. Because just good conversations are always kind of interesting to listen to. But yeah, I like that as a principle. And I suppose after 250 episodes, like you've done a lot of episodes. Do you still feel like that original like goal that you had for it is like still prominent, or like would you say your goals for the podcast have changed since starting?
Honestly, not so much. If now that I think about it, like it's just like I didn't start it as a serious project. Oh my god, I'm gonna be a great kick-ass podcaster and stuff like that. No, I was like, that'd be fun to do that, you know?
Yeah,
because I like listening to podcasting. Like it was such a chill start. Like it was such a mellow thing. I just that'd be funny. And I did like 10, 12 episodes, and I was like, that'd be funny to reach 100 episodes. Then I started going crazy and just inviting people, and just I finally reached 100 episodes. I was like, that would be really funny to get 1,000 episodes. Like it's literally like that. Like to me in life, I don't know, you've probably experienced this as well. When you take something so seriously, you usually put a lot of pressure on yourself, and you sometimes really crumble under pressure for different reasons.
Yeah.
But when you do something for shits and giggles or memes, you realize you're unintentionally do something, which by the way, I'm not saying I'm doing something big. Like if you look at on average the quality of the recordings of a podcast, like I'm a super self-aware guy. It's not perfect, to be honest. The audio quality could be a lot better. The video quality could be a lot better. Like I actually bought this light later after 60 episodes to make even though I don't have a webcam, the video quality would be better.
Yeah.
But because at the end, like, I'm not doing it for the followers necessarily. Of course, I do my best to make the edits better. I put it on YouTube and all the audio platforms. But in the end of the day, I'm doing it for me. If I don't enjoy it, I don't care. I'm not doing it anymore. And I still enjoy it. But these past couple of months, because I've been going through so many things, I had to deal with pneumonia in summer. Then I had to, now I'm
pneumonia. Dude.
Yeah, I had COVID and pneumonia. It's been a roller coaster, man, this past couple of years.
Yeah.
And funny thing, the doctor kind of suggested that they might have to surgically remove my lung or something. And I had my Turkish friend with me. They showed me the MRI.
Bro.
And it was really bad. But thankfully, I'm good now. I got this much antibiotics, and it was a wild, crazy story, man.
Yeah.
And it's kind of funny. It's the same time I got that, disease. The exact time last year before that, I had COVID.
Yeah. I
wonder if there's a correlation.
I mean, it could be that it just messed your immune system up so much that it allowed other things to jump in. Like, I mean, I'm not a medical professional, and I never will be. But yeah.
How about you? Have you had any really rough, patches when it comes to suddenly getting a disease and you have to push through it? Yeah, I like this. The podcast is getting personal. I really like this. Let's go on.
No, I've been pretty fortunate in terms of health stuff. I've never really run into issues with needing to go to, I've never been to the hospital. I've never needed to go. I've been very, very lucky in that. I've never broken a bone. Some would say that that must mean you're very healthy. Some would maybe say, oh, you're so risk averse. You don't, put yourself out there a lot. But yeah, I've been very fortunate. I think the worst I've ever really had, been things I think COVID was pretty rough, but ear infections, that's my fun thing, gross fun thing. That's not great. I've been very fortunate with the health side of things. I've known some people who've gone through health stuff, and I don't know how they've maintained momentum on their stuff throughout those things, but it is really important. If you can do it, then you can probably continue to work through anything.
Yeah, definitely. And one big thing I could take away that I've learned in my life by now, the 26 years and 4 months I have experience in this life, which is, I think, literally, this is one of my biggest lessons in life, is the most important rules is that mental health is everything.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care what anyone says or what medical journal says. If the reason that people live up to more than 100 years is it's just mental health, I think,
Mhm.
because you see them, drink whiskey, smoke cigars, but there was this guy who was a World War II veteran. I think he was the oldest World War II veteran, and he passed away a couple of years ago. He lived up to 116 years, and even he was still driving. By the way, every year he would go and renew his driving license, and he would, eat. He showed they were making a documentary. He was eating 2 scoops of pecan pie butter ice
I
cream.
think I've seen this guy. Yeah,
Yeah,
he lived in
and
like a suburban like
exactly.
residence in the US, right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, I think I can't remember if it was the same guy, but I'm pretty sure like he was like, it's all
Matches the
just down to
description.
like basic diet. Like it was just like keeping it simple. I think, yeah, the ice cream thing. He was like, I can eat this every day and it
Whiskey, the
doesn't matter.
cigar, and he would say, "I don't actually inhale the smoke; I puff it out, so it's
Yeah,
healthy."
yeah,
I was like,
yeah.
"Wow, this guy is such a badass."
Yeah.
And yeah, rest in peace. Honestly, he's passed away. I heard, and
Yeah.
but he
I
lived a
think,
full life, 116 years. I mean, damn.
yeah, man. I was going to say with the mental health stuff, like, I think that a lot of people's aversion to and the struggles of doing personal artwork in your free time it can have a real effect on your mental health, and in ways that people don't really expect, because so much about like what you create as an artist is just constantly open to people's like criticisms, because it's the first judgment that like anyone, like the saying, don't judge a book by its cover. It's like, well, people will with art because it's literally what you see. It's the first thing. Like, it's that knee-jerk response when you see like a character artist's work when they're a junior, and it's instantly an uncanny valley, and you can tell immediately this is not what a human looks like. And it can, like, if you tell them those things of like, this doesn't look right, this doesn't look like a human being, it can be so difficult because it's literally a criticism of your eye, like how you interpret, how you make things, and that can be really tough to go through. I think it's just developing that thick skin, or just recognizing that it's you have to work through a lot of that stuff to get to be a good artist. You can't coast through with. I mean, it depends on what your goals are, obviously, but yeah, you've got to separate yourself from it at some point, and let the art just be the art and you be you. The criticisms of your artwork aren't necessarily a reflection of you. And even if you do good artwork, that doesn't necessarily make you a good person. I think I've seen too many times now artists say, don't meet your heroes, because an amazing piece of artwork doesn't always mean that you're going to get on with the person. Yeah, I think it's really important to express that separation. It can be really hard to do personal art on top of like a full-time job as well. I think I said earlier, like, I don't set deadlines for any of my personal work, because like I'm not working for anyone but myself. And if I could work for myself, I wouldn't set deadlines. It'll get done when it gets done. I know that like I don't need a deadline to motivate me. I can power on to the finished like product. But yeah, people just need to find healthier ways to go about that stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Like, about this whole thing that, just because don't meet your heroes and stuff like that. Like, I have to say this thing that and it's purely subjective based on my experience of like, talking with so many different personalities and characters, is that sometimes, when you hear a rumor about someone, like an artist, don't try to jump on the bandwagon. Not just that artist, just in general, even between your circle of friends. Always try to see clearly all sides of the story before you make judgments. Because the situation can get really weird, And
Yeah, I've
because
personally seen stuff
yeah,
like this, where I mean, I'm not going to mention anything
of
like
course.
personal, but like I've seen this happen. I've seen this person's done X, and this group thinks that that's happened. This other group thinks that something else has happened, and it's really scary to see that, especially when like as an outsider you might like both people on side of an argument, and think like that potentially associating with either group could make you out to be like a villain, because people have such emotional feelings about something. It's really scary, and it's kind of why, at least in this industry profession, like I'm not ever going to express my opinion or pick a side. Like it's not worth it. It doesn't make for it doesn't actually fix a situation necessarily. It's just it can only just feed the fire of like the grief or the grievance. It's tough. It's really tough. I think empathy is necessary for getting through those situations.
Yeah. And the other big thing is that no one is perfect. Like no one. And what I mean by that is maybe that artist that you look up to and her track record has been really good when it comes to, maybe they match all your ideologies, and stuff like that. And they suddenly someday say, oh, this guy's bad.
Yeah.
That guy is not perfect. That woman is not perfect. They probably have their own biases and they could be wrong in their judgment. So always try to see it with just make your own decisions. Don't try to jump on any bandwagon. And also, like, I'm going to be honest, I even made some stupid mistakes when it comes to interacting with people. And then sometimes guests of the podcast. Yeah, there, I said it. And I regret it. And I said my stars, and that's it. And just because you see me all the time smiling, doing the introduction, doesn't mean I'm a perfect person. It's just the only thing I can do is just live and learn.
You also talk publicly in like on a podcast for like hours at a time. Like, and you do it a lot. Like you've done 250 episodes. Like that's a lot of conversation to be public. Like, I mean, I found recently when the disco stuff kind of like went live, man, it's really weird to see like your name like out there. It's very weird. I'm very uncomfortable with it. I am an introvert. I'm like starting to get better at like the public speaking. Like my first university talk, I was just shaking through the whole thing. I was so nervous. Like it was the most terrifying thing in the world. And I'm trying to get better at like, showing my stuff publicly. But with the disco scene, it hit like it. I suppose all of my artwork up until this point has just hit artists. It just goes to ArtStation, goes to like art community Twitter. But this is like, no, this is people who enjoy the game. They don't need to be an artist. They could just be anyone. It got picked up by like news outlets like PC Gamer. And I'm getting attention from people who are completely, they're consumers more than like artists. They're outside of like, the niche that I'm used to. And seeing like, all of that response, is terrifying. Like 3 days after it posted, I wasn't feeling good about it being posted. I was like, oh my God, I just want to hide. Like, I don't want this to be seen anymore. Can people just go back to not seeing this and like forget that it ever existed? And it's really weird.
I guess the best way I could describe what the feeling that you're trying to describing is like you feel like you're like in your underwear in the middle of a jungle and there's like 360 degrees, there's pikes pointing at you and you're trying to like, Jesus, is this going to poke me? Is this going to poke me?
And at the end of the day, that's literally just like, it's just art. Like there's nothing that people can interpret like weirdly about it, I don't think. But I suppose in your position, like you're maintaining conversations with people that can take very different like routes, and like you might run into a topic where you say the wrong thing and like there it's been said, and like it can be, or maybe you forget to remove something in an edit, and it's stressful. Like it's really stressful. I empathize with that.
Yeah, thanks so much. But my whole thing is just to keep it real as much as possible when it comes to recording the podcast. Like the big thing is when someone is playing the podcast on the background while they're doing the dishes or playing video games or working on something, I want them to feel like they're overhearing a conversation, not listening to a polished product such as podcast number 251, for example, Like that's my main goal. One of the thing is because to be honest, I always listen to podcasts or watch YouTube videos whenever I'm doing something. That's not really a good thing actually when it comes to like attention, but I do that. Like when it comes to even working out, I have podcasts on or just anything. And so I'm basically trying to make a product that I would enjoy listening to. Just an actual conversation. Just like like another good way I can make an example is those radio station conversations in different GTA games.
Yeah.
Remember?
I mean, they're like some of the best written dialogue in gaming. Yeah, they're amazing. I mean, I think what you enjoy about those is that they're just so satirical. that's
Oh
where
yeah.
you get the joy out of it. But yeah, I enjoy talking about art as much as the next artist. I suppose it can sometimes get like the topics. At least I felt with some podcasts. Like I'm afraid I haven't listened to a ton of yours yet. Like it's a new thing for me to discover. The Rostov podcast is like my next thing to listen to. But yeah, I think like repetition and covering like the same topics. Like I think it's a really important discussion to have. But like the whole how to get into the industry thing is something that I think at a time I was getting very sick of. I was like, why is this topic being covered? And it's like, well, I'm bored of it because I'm in the industry and it's irrelevant to me. And I was also questioning, like, why does the topic come up so much? And then I remembered that, like, yeah, getting into the industry for me is so different to how someone is going to now. Like, enough years have passed where, like, yeah, no, they need someone now to tell them, like, who's just got in, like, here's the route. And you just hope that, like, the right people are on, like, their platform telling people how to get in now, because I could tell a student how I think you should get into the industry, but I didn't do it last year. Like someone else did. I can tell you how I got in, but it might be irrelevant to current artists.
Yeah, I'm sorry. There was something wrong with my microphone. I was just.
No, that's all good, man.
Yeah,
that's all good.
I would say that was really awkward. And yeah, see, like this is one of those moments as well. But I guess, like, by the way, I have to, like, say sorry in advance if you're going to listen to my old episodes. Like, even they couldn't be considered old because they were like 190 episodes in. But yeah, there's always something. I always find something wrong with every episode I record. For example, I'm like, why do I, fiddle with my hair so much in that episode? Why do I like not looking at the camera right? Like there's so many of these things when it comes to this, but I always try to like, keep calm and just trying to enjoy the whole process as much as possible and learn from any guest that comes on. And that's all I can do. But fortunately,
I'm going to listen back to this and I'm like, I don't believe I sound like that. I sound like an idiot. Like I hate my voice. It's the worst thing in the world. Like it will be the thing that stops me from listening back to this podcast. Actually, I think it's like, I just sound like a dick.
Nah, I don't think so. Like, I mean, at first I used to think about my voice, but right now I've heard it so much that I'm like, that's just my voice, I guess.
Yeah, you get used to it, yeah. Which is a good reason to accept podcast invitations, I suppose.
Yeah. And all right, so we talked so much technical questions and stuff and about game industry, but now I want to ask you something like a little bit off topic. Like, what area beside the area you're working on right now would you be interested to explore and learn in the future? Like anything non-art related going on in your life?
Non-art related?
Yep.
Oh, okay. I think I'm looking at. I kind of want to get into like maybe doing some like alcohol like production stuff, like making my own booze. Like I've been seeing a lot of stuff about making like mead and making like ciders and spirits and stuff, and that just sounds really fun. I'm kind of always looking for ways to expand my list of hobbies. I think I've come to the realization now that like working as much on like my own art as I have has left me with a passion to go out and find like other hobbies to do in my free time. And yeah, that I've been really getting into making coffee as well. Like ever since I moved up to Liverpool, because I was living in London for quite a while. And the worst part about London was that you can't afford anything more than like the smallest flat in the world. Like it's tiny, it's expensive, and you can't really like host people. But I'm finally able to like, I've got enough space to like bring people up. And I think having things like coffee to provide, like, maybe if I had my own alcohol to provide, like it just sounds like a really nice experience to be able to like give to people when like they come up and visit. Yeah, I think just that kind of stuff sounds fun to me right now.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. Like I've made my own mead when I was 16 when
Oh yeah?
out of a YouTube tutorial. And
how did that go?
actually pretty good.
Yeah?
Surprisingly pretty good. Yeah, I think their
Okay.
YouTube channel was Storm the Castle Outcome. I really love that channel.
Yeah.
Like the guy would teach, how to make, miniatures like paper maches and meads and anything
Okay.
medieval.
Yeah.
And of course, the reason I made mead was because of Skyrim. And at the time, I was really into
Ah,
Skyrim.
yeah. Well, I think 16-year-old me trying to make mead would probably mess it up extremely badly.
No, but
And
that's a testament to how easy it is to make mead. It's very
yeah,
simple,
yeah. Well,
honestly.
now I know that, but I think even 16-year-old me back then probably wouldn't have been able to do it. I think
I don't know, man.
I
If you
had to
go by
learn
the
a lot.
tutorial, yeah. If you go by the tutorial, you can do anything. Honestly, I love YouTube for that. And well, and again, of course, we've reached the final question and section of the podcast, which is called Time Capsule.
Okay.
And well, as the name suggests, I think you can already kind of guess, how it's going to be. Basically, if you could, from all your experience in life, what are some of the most important and valuable lessons you've learned in your life that you could tell anyone? Like, imagine this recording is going to be put into a time capsule, and like hundreds of years in the future, people can listen to it. And what would that be from yourself, a human, to any other human being who might listen to this podcast at any point of time in the future? What would you have to say?
I don't know who originally said this, but I think fail faster is the thing that I'll always, tout as like this is the best attitude to take towards, I think, learning anything, and learning being so much of a part of people's lives. Like, just be prepared to fail and don't let that knock you back. Just jump straight back in with the knowledge that you've picked up and fail again, and keep doing that until you get it right. Like, learn from the mistake, move on, apply the new knowledge. Don't let the pain of making a mistake, or making just having an accident, don't let that prevent you from trying again. Because if you don't, and that's where you stop, then you never kind of realize where you get to go with things, and how far you can go. With the personal art that I do, man, there are so many times where you make something and you just realize, oh my God, this doesn't live up to the quality it needs to be. I'm going to have to start from scratch. I messed up completely, or I tackled this from the wrong direction. You have to make those mistakes, so the next time you do it, it's better.
I love it. It's very simple and short, but very powerful. Fail faster. That's it. Fail faster.
Again, I can't remember who said it. Someone a lot more profound and interesting probably said that.
Yeah, I think I've heard that somewhere before. I don't know who it was, but yeah, it doesn't matter. If you Google, we'll find out. But for now, thank you so much for taking your time and coming on this podcast on such short notice. Literally yesterday we had a chat, and here we are.
Yeah, no problem.
The time of recording of this podcast by Turkish time right now is 15th of November at 6:49 p.m. to 2023. And it'll be uploaded probably next week, around Monday or Tuesday, yeah. And with that being said, where can people contact you if they had any questions? Is there Instagram okay?
Yeah, ArtStation is probably the best place to reach out, just because when I'm on ArtStation, I'll be thinking about, professional stuff. That's kind of the place for it. But yeah, Instagram, Twitter, ArtStation, anywhere's good to kind of reach out.
Oh, sorry. Again, I forgot to unmute my mic. All right, awesome. And with that out of the way, thanks so much for coming by, and thank you to anyone who tuned in to listen to this episode as well. Thanks so much for putting up with my very messy schedule of upload. I'll try. I'm just a human who's trying to survive. I guess that's the best way I could describe my situation. So yeah, bear with me on that one. And with that being said, again, thanks to anyone who listened, and thanks again for coming by. And until next episode, which is going to be recorded tomorrow. Bye-bye. Take care.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Bye.